Hello, hello, hello. Okay, I'm getting booted up here, so hopefully you can see me. Yes, yes, okay. All right, so just double checking that the stream is going. Please let me know if the sound and audio are okay. As usual, got to do the audio check. What's up, Dharma Vajra? What's up, Frater RC? What's up, Richard Divine? What's up, Chad? And what is up, Sus Rando? We got the crew here. What's up? Okay. All right. So it looks like we're streaming. Looks like everything's good. Hopefully everything's good. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, let's just get into it then, shall we? All right, everyone. It is Sunday. We are coming to the end of March 2025. And it's been real. Today's Sunday stream. What's up? What's up? Oh, let's set a goal. I don't have any more cat reveals to do. What's up, Adam? If anyone has a super chat goal, let me know. Okay, so today we are going to continue with Sunday services and with reading from Aleister Crowley's AA reading list. So Crowley's transcendent magical order, of which representatives are all around you, including yours truly. Crowley put together probably one of the best occult... Yes, welcome to the Temple of Inanna, Rachel. Crowley put together probably the best occult reading list of all time, in addition to putting together the Equinox, which in my opinion is the best go-to source book on magic ever, the Equinox, right? Luckily, all this stuff is free online. But also, he put together a reading list of between the AA and the OTO, his two major magical orders, he put together a reading list of about 250 books, give or take, that consist of the classics of world spirituality, right? And it includes everything from things like the I Ching to the Tao Te Ching to the King James Bible to the oracles of Zoroaster to, Crowley's own writing to all the way to suggestive fiction that has magical themes like, for instance, Dracula, The Blossom and the Fruit by Mabel Collins, lots more, and also includes a lot of the cutting edge for his time, for the early part of the 20th century, scientific and philosophical texts. And his idea with that reading list was to give people a comprehensive curriculum where they could understand what, as he put it, the masters of all ages have said, so that he can converse with them in their own language. So that means, practically speaking, that means what are the books that carry the quintessence of Taoism, the quintessence of Buddhism, the quintessence of Hinduism, the quintessence of Hermeticism, at least that were available at that time. And it's a phenomenal list, and we're probably going to be going to it quite a lot on this channel. So here's what we're doing today. Today we are doing the Divine Pymander, or Pymander, by Hermes Trismegistus, which is from the Greek Hermetica. But there's a certain twist here. And I am probably this is something that I've realized you can do recently, that I have been doing with lots of old Taoist texts, but we're going to do with the Hermetica now. So this was translated in the 1600s, in like 1650, and the language here is like, and if the two parts be overcome, they become quiet and are content to accept of it as their ruler. But if the one be overcome of the two, it is by them led and carried to be punished by its being and continuance here. And other such things that you would expect, I don't know, an elf in a ditch by the side of the road in rural Europe somewhere to pop out of a hole and yammer at you. Meaning, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to the modern mind. However, what I realized is you can take the original text, in this case Greek, from the first 2 centuries, and have AI translate it and do a more modern translation, which frankly is probably going to be better than whatever human translator did it. So 2 translations were made of this, one in the 1650s and then another in 1906 by G.R.S. Mead. But I have just translated it using OpenAI's latest model, ChatGPT 4.5. And I have asked it to translate the text for modern readers so that it makes sense, and also to make sure that the subtext and the meaning is drawn out. So I've done this with Taoist texts, and like suddenly they make perfect sense. Suddenly it's like somebody you know wrote it on the internet, which is wild. It's kind of a similar effect to, you know, on YouTube, there's lots of old black and white footage that has now been colorized and restored, and now looks like it's happening now. So it's kind of similar to that. So before we get into that, and we will, it's not very long. Today's not going to be a super long session. Before we get into that, let's go to, you guessed it, Evil Brotherhood Tracker. All right. Yes, it's that time again. So we already caught up with the... Oh, by the way, some very nice comments here. And thank you everyone that offers support. I just want to say that all of your support means a whole lot because I get a lot of pushback and sometimes hatred. And so, you know, all of your positive... I don't expect you to agree with me. You don't need to agree with me on everything. In fact, you probably shouldn't. But I do appreciate when people post supportive comments thanking me for at least raising these issues. It means a lot. And so we got some great comments. So Eliphaz Leviathan 93, which is a great name, says, hey, I've been thinking about Hermes lately. Awesome. Silly Dilly asks, is Bukowski on the AA list? He's on the Alcoholics Anonymous list, if that's the joke that you're making. And then again, Eliphaz Leviathan, again, hilarious, says, dude, I'm really happy you're using AI and not a neo-Luddite like seemingly everyone else in the space. Yeah, thank you. I mean, come on. AI is awesome. You can create anything from it. I don't understand the Luddite approach to AI. The reality is, first of all, it's not going away. It's out of the box, and it's just going to get better and better and better. So, as I see it, you have two choices. One is to stick your head in the sand and let the tractors roll over your ass, which is what most people seem to be choosing. The other is to realize that it's just a tool, guys and gals. AI is just a tool. It's no different from when we discovered fire or, you know, Bluetooth or the printed word, any of that, right? It's just a tool. If you're an artist, you can you can use any tool for anything. So it augments. It doesn't take away anything. It doesn't remove anything. It augments what human beings can do. And I think that is phenomenal. That's phenomenal. It's allowed me to express myself so much more fully. Maybe too much more fully, if you ask some people. So I'm a big fan of AI. And, you know, I also think it really doesn't really matter whether you are a fan of AI or not. It's not going away. So it's like, oh yeah, we're scared of fire. Okay, well you can be scared of fire like a little bitch, or you can learn how to use it safely and appropriately. And that's kind of how I feel. All right, yeah, What's Up says, I'm a Virgo sun, so Hermes is always on my mind. Thank you, Jason, I really appreciate the knowledge, and your authenticity makes it so enjoyable. That's great. Slim Jim says, I literally have no current use for AI. Think harder. If you don't have a current use for AI, you don't have a use for anything. That's not a dig. That's just how it is. All right, let's find out what's going on with the religion of peace, shall we? All right. Yeah, Howard says it's technology. Getting annoyed about it is just wasted energy, although there's a real debate about it being able to make art yet. Although AI has won art contests. And I understand the perspective of artists, or literally anyone who's afraid of not just losing perhaps their career, but their identity, right? But it's like, use the tool, incorporate it into what you do. Incorporate it. Don't reject it. Incorporate it, you know, because everyone else is going to be. And that's just how it is. That's just how it is. Okay, so. Na 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 na. Let's resize this. Okay, so I have already caught everyone up in my last live stream during the week on the most recent terrorist attacks around the world. For instance, they are continuing. I don't think there's anything new from midweek, but the mass killings continue in Nigeria and Syria and Central Africa in general. And luckily, it doesn't look like anything's happened in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, for the last week, but it was very, very, very bad the week before that. All right. But we got, let's see. What do we got here? Germany, Muslim serial offenders beat 2 gays up. Some of these sites are better sourced than others. But this is I have verified this article. This is from the German Express. Yeah, last Saturday, 2 men, 26 and 28, were out about in Maximilianstrasse in Augsburg, and the group of men beat both men to the ground and continued to kick them in the upper body and head area. The perpetrators then fled. Okay. Yeah. In an interview with a local newspaper, a victim of the current offense reported he had feared for his life while the perpetrators were kicking him while he was lying on the ground. They are said to have insulted the victim as an F word. Okay. There's that. Don't need to dwell on that too much. And then there's this. This is particularly foul. From the Jerusalem Post. Toronto man, I'm going to plant a bomb in every synagogue in Toronto. We are criticizing this immensely. This is not agreeing with this in the slightest. You know how these algorithms are. So, Waisuddin Akbari, I know when I'm going to, it sounds like a Christian. I know when I'm going to die because I'm going to plant a bomb in every synagogue in Toronto. Okay. Cool story. You know, particularly now that Canada's decided it wants to declare war on the U.S. and inflict maximum pain on the U.S. It's like, guys, I don't think this is going to go the way you want it to, and it looks like you got enough problems of your own. Afghanistan-born shawarma restaurant owner Waisuddin Akbari confided in car salesman Cameron Ahmad about the plot last March, and this was from the November Ontario Court of Justice ruling. Yeah, he's 41 years old. Okay, so he expressed, he was buying a used car and expressed concerns about financing a new vehicle because he believed interest payments would be funneled to the Israeli government to finance a supposed genocide against Palestinians. Okay there, buddy. What else we got? I hope that you have been following the protests in Gaza. Uh-oh, we got doggo. Get out. Oh. I hope that you've been following protests in Gaza, where Gazans have finally, presumably Hamas has now been weakened enough that they have a little bit more leeway to speak out, and Gazans are now massively protesting in the streets against Hamas, their elected terrorist government, which I guess they're now tired of after being shelled for 2 years. So, unfortunately, the head of the protest was just murdered. Or, excuse me, not the head, but this unfortunate individual, Odeh Nasser al-Rabi, was tortured and executed in late March after participating in protests against the Hamas terror group. All right. Yep, he was 22 years old. And then they left his body in front of his family home over the weekend. So, that's the news in Gaza. I'm sure the people will find a way to blame that on Israel somehow. Let's see. Oh, this was hilarious. This is on Fox, but deal with it. Democratic candidate caught on camera applauding notorious anti-Semites' violent rhetoric. You break his neck. Video resurfaced of a leading Democratic gubernatorial candidate embracing radical anti-Semite Louis Farrakhan. Oh, Lord, not Louis Farrakhan. Progressive Newark Mayor Ross Baraka, one of the top Democratic candidates for New Jersey governor, was caught on video applauding and embracing radical Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan as he calls white people demons and calls for violence as retribution. Farrakhan 91, for those who don't know, he's one of the most famous religious figures in America, is a longtime radical anti-Semite preacher known for making inflammatory statements against Jews, white people, and LGBTQ individuals. He has also praised Schmittler as a great man and has become one of the most controversial figures in the United States due to his derogatory comments about Israel. Okay, and progressive New York Mayor Ross Baraka was applauding these ideas. Okay, that's nothing new. That happens quite frequently with Farrakhan, as he is the spiritual leader for quite a number of people. Here we go. Christian organization rescues 113 Christian families that were enslaved in Pakistan's brick kilns. Total of 213 families freed. These families were bonded to the brick kilns because they had been trapped in debt due to loans they had no choice but to take from the brick kiln owners in times of hardship and crisis. So that's typical tactics for slavers and human traffickers, unfortunately. But looks like it's all over Pakistan. Yeah, so they have been freed. That is wonderful. And let's see. Anyways, you kind of get the idea here. Oh, and one final thing. I hope you all saw this. This was all over social media. There are massive uprisings in Turkey in which Pikachu is participating, as you should be able to see. So even the Pokemon are rising up. An ex-user commented, "I'm not too familiar with Turkish politics, but I'm on whatever side Pikachu is on." So it looks like they're protesting the Erdogan government. Yeah, rocking out Pikachu. We got Spider-Man riding an alien. That is hilarious. That is hilarious. Okay, so there we have it. All right, so that's what we got for today from the religion of leaving people in pieces. All righty, let's get into the Divine Pymander. And if anyone wants to correct my pronunciation, feel free, because I'm always open to new input, and I'm always open to people telling me I have got it wrong, respectfully. So a little bit about this text ahead of time. I have had... Okay, here's a little bit about the text. So as I actually posted this in the text for the video, what is the Divine Pymander? The Divine Pymander, also known by its Greek title Poimandres, is a spiritual and philosophical text from the Hermetic tradition. It appears as the first book of the Corpus Hermeticum, a collection of mystical treatises attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, which, by the way, was a lot of different authors over many different centuries. It was not one person. It was a pen name used by a school of thinking. The legendary sage who fuses the Greek god Hermes with the Egyptian god Thoth. Written as a dialogue or vision, Poimandres presents a revelation of divine knowledge. It narrates how Hermes, in a meditative state, encounters a celestial being, Poimandres, who unveils the secrets of the universe, the nature of the human soul, and the path to salvation. The title Poimandres is often interpreted to mean man-shepherd, indicating this figure is like a shepherd of men's souls, or the divine mind, Nous, guiding humanity. Through vivid imagery and allegory, the text explores creation, cosmology, the fall of man, and spiritual rebirth, encapsulating many core themes of Hermetic philosophy. So the Poimandres is structured as an initiatory dialogue between Hermes and the divine figure Poimandres, who identifies himself as the mind of sovereignty. So this is a common style for instance, Greek, particularly in Greek, right? For the Greek philosophical dialogues with Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all of that. It also reminds me of the Bhagavad Gita, the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, where Arjuna is trying to psych himself up to deal with the impending Ramayana war. So it says, the narrative unfolds as Hermes seeks wisdom, and Poimandres grants him a vision of the cosmos' creation and man's place in it. In this vision, Hermes witnesses an ultimate light, which is God and mind, and is surrounding chaotic darkness. Poimandres explains that in the beginning, the unity, the supreme mind, emanated a secondary creative mind, the logos or divine word, through which the cosmos was formed. A primal creative word descended like a holy logos into the chaos, separating light from darkness and organizing the elements, fire, air, water, earth, out of the primordial waters. Poimandres describes how the Nous, divine mind, together with the logos, gave rise to 7 rulers, governing intelligences, often interpreted as planetary deities or archons, to administrate the newly formed cosmos. After establishing the macrocosm, the supreme Nous then created man, not a mortal man, but an archetypical anthropos made in the image of God, imbued with divine intelligence and creative power. This primordial man was of noble origin, meant to live above the lower creation. However, as the story goes, this divine human figure descended through the celestial spheres out of a desire to know nature. Upon gazing into the reflection of the divine form in the waters of the world, the primal man fell in love with nature. This union of the heavenly man with earthly nature produced the duality of human existence, the intermixing of a mortal soul and mortal material body. In Hermetic myth, this is essentially the fall of the soul, the point at which the human being becomes bound in the physical world. So these are classic themes of religion. These are classic themes in Hermeticism, certainly. Hermeticism, in many ways, absorbs ideas from Gnosticism. So these are deeply Gnostic ideas. And I'm not a scholar of Hermeticism, but in many ways, Hermeticism carries on Greco-Hellenic thought and also Gnosticism, which is, of course, from the Middle East and the Jerusalem and Israel specifically. So, but we're talking about one general part of the world: Egypt, Israel, Greece, the Mediterranean, right? So this is Mediterranean esoteric thinking, which, of course, remember, the Mediterranean is near Africa and India, so as well as Rome, of course. And there were roads constructed, for instance, the Silk Road, and there was frequent trade between all these cultures. And so when you study beliefs from this cluster of the world, which is basically where most of the religions come from, you see people sharing these ideas across many different traditions. And this one in particular, that of the divine being attracted to the world and then becoming entrapped within it and forgetting its own nature, is a classic theme. It is a classic theme. It's in Judaism. It is in Hinduism and Buddhism, particularly Hinduism. It is in Hermeticism. It is in Gnosticism. And different traditions see it differently. Some traditions, like Gnosticism, take a very, very negative view of it, where you have, for instance, primary Gnostic writers like Philip K. Dick describing the world as a black iron prison, suggesting that when the divine nature is attracted to the world, it actually becomes imprisoned, it becomes forgetful of its nature, as I said, and becomes trapped. And some religions, for instance, Gnosticism, also Buddhism, also some Gnostic sects of Islam, essentially see the world as a trap and as a bad place, and that you must break out of the matrix by any means necessary and then break other people out by any means necessary. That's the most negative possible read of this. The most positive one, which you see more in probably Hermeticism, but you definitely see it in Hindu Tantra and Hinduism, is the idea that while, yes, that process has occurred, the soul has come into this material existence to learn from itself and to experience, and it is voluntary. It is not involuntary. The soul descends, it basically, the positive Gnostic, let's call them the negative and positive Gnostic view, okay, in the broadest sense. The negative Gnostic view is that the soul is trapped in an illusion. The positive Gnostic view, which is the one I ascribe to, is that the soul chooses to incarnate within Maya, within illusion, because it's fun, or at the very least for its own reasons, but that it is volitional. The thing about Gnosticism and some things like, for instance, Vajrayana, particularly the thing about Gnosticism that really fucks people up and really makes them paranoid is that idea of lack of free will. It's that idea of non-volitionality, meaning they did not choose to be here. I didn't choose to be born, that type of thing. That tends to produce a trapped mentality, and anyone who's lived on this planet for more than a few decades and had some actual experience of life can probably tell you that a trapped mentality, or a mentality that says you have no choices, quite frequently leads to very, very, very bad decisions in life. It leads to misery, it can lead to violence, it can lead to destructiveness with your environment, right? Whereas if you understand that you're here because you want to be, suddenly life is beautiful. Life is a beautiful dream to be enjoyed, to be savored in every moment. I wake up every morning and I'm grateful just to see my 2 dogs. You know, it's like, that's not a trap. For me, the existence of dogs and cats proves the existence of a benevolent God. You may feel differently, but you probably don't feel differently. Okay, so key themes from the Divine Pymander specifically. From this creation story, several important Hermetic themes emerge. Metaphysical cosmology. The text lays out a hierarchical cosmology, a chain of being from the one God to mind, Nous, to logos, word, to the powers of the cosmos, the seven rulers, down to nature and matter. The universe is depicted as an emanation of the divine mind, and everything in existence is fundamentally a manifestation of God's thought. It presents a grand vision of a living, mindful cosmos in which the material world is imbued with spiritual meaning. Another key theme from this text, before we start reading it, is, so I'm telling you what to look out for, is the dual nature of humankind. Humanity is portrayed as having a unique double nature. As Poimandres explains, man is both mortal and immortal. Mortal because of the body, immortal because of the real self. Being born from God's mind, humans are above the material cosmos in their essence, yet by incarnating in nature, we have become subject to destiny and the constraints of the physical realm. In the text's words, of all living beings on earth, man alone is double. Although above the harmony of the cosmos, he has become a slave within it. Okay, so this is a more nuanced view where, if I'm reading it correctly, it suggests, and we'll go into the text, but it suggests that we are spiritually free, but that the body is enslaved to matter. I think that that's probably true. W.B. Yeats, a Golden Dawn initiate, summed it up as, Yeats wrote in his poetry at one point that to be human is to be an immortal soul tethered to a dying animal. And people tend not to like that when I say that, but it's kind of true, right? Or it is true, rather. So this strikes an interesting middle ground here. This Hermetic view emphasizes the spiritual nobility of the human soul as a divine spark, contrasted with our lower corporeal existence. The human condition is thus one of forgetfulness of our true origins, and the goal is to awaken and liberate the divine aspect within. Couldn't agree more. Another theme, the fall and the problem of attachment. The Poimandres uses the allegory of the primal man falling in love with nature to illustrate how the soul becomes entangled in matter. Again, classic themes. This stuff is even in Greek mythology of the gods coming down, like Narcissus, for instance, or Leda and the Swan, or Zeus coming down in animal form. Nature, often personified as a beautiful woman, or as the material world itself, was enamored of the divine form of man. And through their union, the human soul became bound in the cycle of generation. This is also somewhat reminiscent of mythology about Nephilim or fallen angels breeding with women, which is perhaps a metaphorical way of saying divine consciousness being attracted to material incarnation. This is a mythic explanation for, let me reread this. Nature, often personified as a beautiful woman, or as the material world itself, was enamored of the divine form of man, and through their union, the human soul became bound in the cycle of generation. This is a mythic explanation for why humans experience a sense of exile or bondage in the material world. We carry the glory of our heavenly origin, yet we are weighed down by the chains of the physical body and passions. This theme resonates with Gnostic ideas of the soul's entrapment. So there we go. Okay, here we go. So this goes straight to it, okay? So here you have it. This theme resonates, well, just to back up, we carry the glory of our heavenly origin, yet we are weighed down by the chains of the physical body and passions. This theme resonates with Gnostic ideas of the soul's entrapment, though in Hermeticism the tone is more optimistic. The union of man and nature is part of a divine plan, and the material world is not evil per se, but a lower realm that can be transcended through wisdom. So wisdom here perhaps meaning Sophia in Greek, or Chokmah in Hebrew, the second sphere of the tree of life. So I like this. Hermeticism, unlike Gnosticism, proposes a system. Gnosticism is much more shamanic. If you read the actual Gnostic texts in, for instance, Marvin Meyer's The Gnostic Bible, which is probably the best book to get on the topic, the best collection of Gnostic writings, Gnosticism is full of barbarous words, of magic, of incantations, of things that much more approach folk magic even. and has a very Jack Kirby, you know, cosmology. Hermeticism, on the other hand, tends to be much more cut and dry and suggests a method of return and reversal. And most specifically, that manifests as the Western magical tradition, the Hermetic tradition, where instead of just saying you're trapped in Malkuth, it's like, well, here's the tree of life with 10 spheres and 22 paths. This is how God manifests into the world. Therefore, if you follow the trail back, you can reascend out of the material. And that is true. So another theme, gnosis and enlightenment. Crucially, Poimandres reveals. So yeah, I see people are debating this in the comments, and I'm guessing that many of you, perhaps all of you, have gone back and forth on this issue in your own mind and in your own life, because these themes are core not just to magic. Magic is essentially different from religion, in which it attempts to operationalize a return to God for the individual on their own terms, and it often is very, very successful at that. But I'm guessing that, you may have had this debate within yourself at times. I certainly have. So this will be interesting in that regard. Pymander reveals how the fallen human can return to his original divine state. The core message is one of gnosis, direct spiritual knowledge. By knowing God and knowing oneself, for in the Hermetic view, to truly know oneself is to know the divine within, one can achieve salvation. The latter part of the dialogue focuses on the path of spiritual rebirth. Hermes asks how he may be saved, and Poimandres teaches him about the process of purification and illumination the soul must undergo. So this is consistent throughout. We'll focus on Western spirituality. We could do the whole world, but just for now, this theme is consistent throughout the entirety of Western esotericism. That includes Christianity. Dee and Kelly were very big on this from an esoteric Catholic perspective as well. And Catholicism itself describes this process of purification and illumination under the singular word sanctification, which is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful concept, which is certainly in the Catholic Church, the idea of sanctification. In the Greek Orthodox Church, this process is called theosis. So of man becoming more like God by shedding more and more of his lower nature. And this is just an eternal idea. This leads into the text's description of an inner transformation, often termed rebirth or regeneration, that the seeker must experience to ascend back to the divine. Okay. Last two themes. The first one is spiritual rebirth and the ascent through the spheres. Okay, so the climax of the Divine Pymander details how a soul, upon awakening and at the end of its life, ascends through the celestial spheres. Now, specifically in the Hermetica, and I'm glad we're talking about this ahead of time, in the Hermetica, when people are talking about the celestial spheres, they're talking about the planets, okay? But they're not just talking about the planets, they're talking about the principles and spiritual realities those planets represent. And this later, starting in the 12th century with the Lurianic Kabbalah, would be much, much more codified as the tree of life diagram itself. But here they're talking about the same thing. They're just not referring it to the Kabbalah, but it's the exact same thing. And of course, the Western magical tradition, as we currently understand it, was formulated in the Italian city-states during the Renaissance as a merger of Hermetic thought, Kabbalah, and European folk magic. Okay. As Poimandres describes, the soul passes through the 7 planetary realms, relinquishing at each level the aspects of the lower self associated with that realm, e.g. the 7 tormentors or passions attached to the 7 planets. After this cathartic journey through the 7 spheres, the soul reaches the 8th sphere, the realm of the fixed stars, or the Ogdoad. So the fixed stars specifically are these stars. Thank you, Brad. Much appreciated. Super chat. Thank you so much. The fixed stars are the stars that are far away enough to not rotate in the sky. Unlike the planets and other stars unlike the constellations that are near Earth enough to rotate. And finally attains the 9th sphere. Remember, this is before the discovery of Neptune, Uranus, or Pluto. Finally attains the 9th sphere, which is the presence of God himself. In Poimandres' words, the souls present there rejoice together in God's presence, and having become like the divine beings, they hear the powers above the eighth sphere singing praises to God. The souls ascend to the Father and surrender themselves to the powers, entering into God. This mystical ascent illustrates the Hermetic vision of salvation. The soul, purified of all earthly dross, merges back into the divine mind from which it came. The text calls this ultimate union the supreme good, the highest state of being. For those who attain true knowledge, gnosis, the end goal is God and to become divine. In fact, Poimandres explicitly says, this is the end, the supreme good for those who have had the higher knowledge, to become God. Thus, here we go. Thus, deification, so I was correct, also known as theosis, that's in the Greek church, becoming one with God, is presented as the final result of spiritual rebirth. By the way, this is quite distinct to apotheosis, which you hear people talking about more in a left-handed context, which is becoming a god. But this simply not morally, but simply mathematically is a lower understanding. All right. Finally, last theme, before we read it, is the mission of Hermes and the transmission of wisdom. After this revelatory instruction, Hermes himself undergoes a kind of awakening. The vision ends and he returns to ordinary consciousness, enlightened by Nous, divine mind. He then offers a prayer of thanksgiving and is charged with the mission to teach others the way to salvation. Poimandres commissions Hermes to become the guide to those who are worthy, so that through Hermes, the human race may be saved by God. Hermes becomes a prophet of the knowledge he has received, awakening those who slept in ignorance. The text thus frames itself as an initiatory scripture. Hermes is the first initiate. And by writing down or preaching Poimandres' message, he initiates others. In the story's epilogue, Hermes proceeds to teach people, and we are told that some souls accepted the truth and threw themselves at Hermes' feet in devotion, while others, sadly, mocked and ignored him, preferring the sleep of ignorance. This contrast underscores a final lesson. Not everyone is ready for esoteric wisdom. Only those who follow, like, and subscribe Jason's YouTube, and hopefully become supporters and super chatters. This contrast underscores a final lesson. Only for those with ears to hear will the Divine Pymander offer a path from darkness to light. In summary, the Divine Pymander is about the origin of the cosmos, the divine nature and fall of the human soul, and its journey back to God through spiritual knowledge. It presents a mythic narrative packed with philosophical symbolism. God is light and mind. The cosmos is God's thought. Man is God's child who forgets his origin. Through Nous, divine mind, and Logos, divine word, the world was made. Through Gnosis, divine knowledge, and rebirth, the soul returns to its source. These themes made the Poimandres a foundational text for later mystical and alchemical traditions, as it speaks to the inner transformation required to realize one's true godlike nature. Yeah, so that cosmological framework there, more or less, obviously it's been looked at different ways, modified, reanalyzed over the millennia, but that philosophical framework right there, that is the fundamental thrust of the Western esoteric system itself. The Western esoteric system the goal is to understand how the world was created, and almost in a deistic way, so that it can become a ladder, like Jacob's ladder, in order that the soul may reascend to its home. With the understanding that for the vast majority of humanity, that is never going to happen. And I don't think that that's controversial. You just look around. Just look around, right? One of the things I really wish to impose, not impose, but point out in my work is these people who wrote all these texts are not any different from us. They're also reacting to the human experience. They're reacting to their own mystic visions, their altered states of consciousness, and the experiences that they've had in their lives. It's not hammer horror. It's not some arcane thing. These are things that are within the reach of all of us. These are things that are the spiritual heritage of humanity, and particularly of Western culture, but of humanity as a whole. And also, I will say that the idea of Eastern and Western spirituality, or even individual religions in themselves, is very much a modern concept and has more to do with territory and commerce, frankly, than it does with the reality of how religion worked, at the very least, in the ancient world, where everyone was trading with each other. It seems that may have stopped around the Renaissance, actually. possibly because of the change in trade and the shift to shipping, or I'm not sure, or the discovery of the New World. But, you know, that is certainly when Islam stopped making any contributions whatsoever to world knowledge in the 14th century. And the reason is because they stopped trading with anybody, because they were absorbing ideas from outside. And that's why they were able to develop mathematical concepts, because they were taking them from outside and then working on what they got. But once they started trading, once they stopped taking in new information, as fundamentalists and religious extremists are wont to do, they stopped producing anything new. So there's a message in there. All right, we can get back more into the historical context later if people are interested, but let's just jump into it. What's a good super chat goal? Let's see. Okay, secret third Shiba. There is a secret third Shiba. It's an evil stuffed animal, but okay. Third Shiba reveal. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Howard has an even better idea. Chimkin for Charlie. Okay. That's a much better idea. All right. So, thank you, Richard. Great idea. So, new super chat goal. Chimkin for Charlie. Your super chats will go to buy chicken for Charles and also Rishi, his new companion. And with 10 super chat goals, I'll do my best to get him some chimkin on camera so you can see your donations at work. Yes. Okay, so let's get into it. Hermes Trismegistus, the Divine Pymander. So again, this is a new translation from the original Greek. It's not a translation of a translation. It's not a copy of a copy. It is from the original Greek as translated by GPT, the GPT 4.5 model. And for those of you like KG who have a knowledge of large language models, if you know of models that might be even better at translating old texts, that would be great. I've used DeepSeek, the Chinese AI, for translating Chinese texts like the Tao Te Ching, for instance, or old versions of Sun Tzu. That works really well for Chinese texts, it seems. And I recommend doing this, by the way. You know, get most of this stuff is available online if it's older than 80 years. Thank you, KG. Super chat, LVX to you as well. Thank you so much. So, anyways, you can do this with any old text and see what you think of this one. This one, it will probably be much more clear to you than, if you read this old plodding translation. Because the thing about when you read it in a translation from the 1600s, well, now you have to translate it from Old English. Okay, the Divine Pymander. And then I will ask you when I'm done with this. It's not very long. It's about 30 passages. When I'm done with this, I will ask you what you think. So write down your notes, your thoughts, questions, and let's have a conversation about it. Group discussion section afterwards. All right. Once, when a thought arose within me concerning the entities that exist, and my mind had ascended exceedingly, and my bodily senses were restrained, as happens to those weighed down by sleep due to excessive food or bodily fatigue, it seemed to me that some being of vast and boundless magnitude called my name and said to me, "What do you wish to hear and to see?" And having understood, to learn and to know. I said, "But who are you?" He replied, "I am Pymander, mind, Nous, the authentia, authority, sovereignty. I know what you desire, and I am present with you everywhere." I said, "I wish to learn about beings, to comprehend their nature, and to know God. This is what I desire to hear." He responded again to me, "Hold firmly in your mind all you wish to learn, and I shall teach you." Having spoken thus, he changed his appearance. And immediately everything was opened to me in an instant, and I beheld a limitless vision, all things having become light, serene and joyous. And seeing it, I was filled with love. And soon thereafter appeared darkness, descending, formed in parts, fearful and grim, coiled sinuously, resembling a serpent, as I imagined. Then the darkness transformed into a certain watery nature, indescribably tumultuous, emitting smoke as if from fire, producing a sound unspeakably mournful. Then from it proceeded an inarticulate cry, like the voice of fire, as I imagined. And from the light, a holy logos descended upon nature, and pure fire leapt forth upward from the watery nature into the heights. It was subtle and sharp, and simultaneously active. And the air, being light, followed after the breath, spirit, rising upward from earth and water so that it seemed suspended from it. But earth and water remained mingled together by themselves, such that earth could not be distinguished from water. Yet they were moved by a spiritual they were moved by the spiritual logos carried upon them in hearing. Pymander then said to me, "Have you understood this vision and what it intends?" "I shall come to know it," I replied. He said, "I am that light, mind, Nous, your God, who existed before the watery nature that appeared from darkness. But the luminous logos coming forth from mind is the Son of God." "What then?" I asked. "Understand it thus," he said, "that in you which sees and hears is the logos of the Lord, and your mind is God the Father. They are not separate from each other, for their union is life." "I thank you," I replied. "But now meditate upon the light, and understand it." Having spoken thus, he stared at me intently for some time, causing me to tremble at his aspect. When he nodded assent, I beheld in my mind the light possessing countless powers and a cosmos, world, order, boundlessly coming into being. And fire contained by an exceedingly great power, restrained and held in place. And these things I discerned, beholding them through the word, logos of Pymander. As I stood amazed, he spoke again to me. "You have seen in your mind the archetypal form, the original principle before the limitless beginning." Thus Pymander spoke to me. "But," I said, "from whence did the elements of nature come into existence?" He answered again, "From the will, boule, of God, which receiving the logos and beholding the beautiful cosmos, imitated it, fashioning itself into a cosmos through its own elements and the souls that it bore." And God the mind, being male, female, life and light, gave birth by logos to another mind, the demiurge, creator, who being the god of fire and spirit, created 7 governors, which in Greek are diokatai, or archons, who envelop with their circles the sensible world, and their governance is called fate. Immediately, from the downward moving elements of God, the logos of God leapt forth into the pure creative nature, and united with the demiurgic mind, for it was consubstantial with it, and the irrational downward elements of nature were left behind, remaining merely as matter. But the demiurgic mind, together with logos, encompassing the circles and spinning them with roaring speed, turned his creations and allowed them to revolve from an indefinite beginning to an endless end, for the point from which they begin is the same as where they cease. Their rotation, as the mind willed, brought forth from the downward elements irrational creatures, for they did not contain logos. The air brought forth winged creatures, the water creatures that swim, and earth was separated from water, as mind willed. And earth brought forth from itself the creatures it possessed, 4-footed animals, crawling creatures, wild and tame beasts. And the Father of all things, mind being life and light, begot man, anthropos, equal to himself, whom he loved as his own offspring, exceedingly beautiful, bearing the image of his Father. For indeed, God loved his own form, and handed over to man all his creations. And man, contemplating the creation of the demiurge in the fire, desired himself also to create. And it was permitted him by the Father, and entering the demiurgic sphere, having full authority, he considered the creations of his brother, the demiurge. And they loved him, and each shared with him their own order. And having fully learned their essence and partaken of their nature, he desired to pierce through the circumference of the circles and comprehend the power of him who sits above the fire. Having all authority over the mortal world and irrational creatures, through the harmony he bent downward, breaking through the sphere, and revealed to downward moving nature the beautiful form of God. Nature, seeing his beauty inexhaustible and all the energy of the governors and the form of God in him, smiled in love, having seen the most beautiful form of man reflected in water, and his shadow upon the earth. He, seeing in her a form like himself in water, loved it and desired to dwell there. Instantly, will became deed, and he inhabited the irrational form. Nature, receiving her beloved, completely embraced him, and they mingled, for they loved one another. Therefore, uniquely among earthly creatures, man is twofold, mortal in body, immortal through essential man, immortal, yet subjected to fate, suffering mortality, superior to harmony, he became enslaved to harmony, being male-female, of male-female father, and sleepless from the sleepless. And after these things my mind said, for I too am now devoted to the Logos. Pymander spoke, this is the mystery hidden until this day. Nature, having mingled intimately with man, brought forth a wonder most marvelous, for having within himself the harmonious nature of the seven, of whom I spoke to you, composed of fire and spirit, nature did not delay, but immediately bore 7 men, corresponding to the natures of the 7 governors, male, female, and soaring in the heavens. After this I said, O Pymander, I am filled now with great longing and yearn to hear more. Do not withdraw. But Pymander replied, Be silent. I have not yet fully unfolded to you the first Logos. I am silent, I said. The origin of these 7 beings was as follows. Earth was female, and water generative. Fire matured it. Nature, having received spirit from Aether, brought forth bodies in the likeness of man. But man came forth from life and light into soul and mind. From life came soul, and from light, mind. Thus, all things of the sensible cosmos remained until the completion of a cycle and the beginnings of kinds, species. Now listen carefully to the Logos you desire to hear. When the cycle was completed, the bond of all things was dissolved by the will of God. For all beings, male-female until then, were separated simultaneously with man, some becoming partly male, others similarly female. Immediately God spoke by a holy Logos, Increase in increasing, and multiply in multitude all creatures and creations, and let the one endowed with Nous, mind, intellect, recognize himself as immortal, and let him understand desire, eros, as the cause of death, and all that exists. Having said this, Providence, through fate and harmony, arranged unions and established generations, and all things multiplied according to their kind. And he who recognized himself attained the supreme good. But he who cherished the body, born of deceptive desire, remains wandering in darkness, suffering sensibly the pains of death. Let me read that again. He who recognized himself attained the supreme good, but he who cherished the body, born of deceptive desire, remains wandering in darkness, suffering sensibly the pains of death. Why then, I asked, do those in ignorance err so greatly as to lose immortality? You appear, said he, not to have paid attention to what you have heard. Did I not bid you to comprehend? I comprehend and remember, I replied, and I thank you also. If you truly comprehended, then tell me, why do they deserve death who remain in death? Because the grim darkness precedes their... Warhammer 40k. Because the grim darkness precedes their material body. From this darkness comes the watery nature, and from this the body is formed in the sensible cosmos, whence death is nourished. You have understood rightly, said he. And how does he who comprehends himself go unto himself, as stated by the Logos of God? I replied, because the Father of all consists of light and life, from whom man arose. You speak well, said he. God and Father is indeed light and life, from whom man came into being. If you understand yourself as composed of life and light, and realize that you are of these, you shall return again into life. Let me read this again. God and Father is indeed light and life, from whom man came into being. If you understand yourself as composed of life and light, and realize that you are of these, you shall return again into life. Thus spoke Pymander. But tell me still further, O my mind, I said, how may I enter life? For God says, let the man endowed with mind, Nous, recognize himself. Do not all men have mind? Speak reverently, he answered, for I, the mind, come personally to those who are holy, good, pure, merciful, and pious. My presence becomes their aid. Immediately they know all things and lovingly appease the Father, giving thanks, praising, and singing hymns harmoniously, filled with affection. Before surrendering the body to death, they despise their senses, knowing their actions. Indeed, I myself, mind, will not allow the impulses arising from the body to accomplish their work. I, acting as gatekeeper, close the entrances to evil and shameful deeds, cutting off their very thoughts. But from the ignorant, wicked, evil, envious, greedy, murderous, and impious, these people, I stand far apart, giving way to the avenging daemon, who, sharpening the fire, assaults and sensibly torments them, arming them further for lawlessness, so they suffer greater punishment. Nor does he cease from insatiable lust, endlessly battling in darkness, torturing and intensifying the fire against them continually. Thoroughly have you taught me all I desired, O mind. Tell me also about the ascent. Pymander replied, Firstly, at the dissolution of the material body, you surrender the body to change. The form you had vanishes, your habits yield their energy to the daemon, and the bodily senses return to their own sources, becoming parts once more, and rising again into activity. Anger and desire enter irrational nature. Then the man rises upward through the harmony, and to the first sphere he surrenders growth and decline. To the second, he gives up devices of evil, ineffective deceit. To the third, the deceit of lust, rendered inactive. So, by the way, particularly for those who said they liked the background, this is very much in resonance with the Descent of Inanna, which is very much the archetypal story of female initiation, which is quite interesting. Then the man rises upward through the harmony. Into the first sphere he surrenders growth and decline. To the second he gives up devices of evil, ineffective deceit. To the third, the deceit of lust rendered inactive. To the fourth, he yields dominance and arrogance, devoid of greed. To the fifth, unholy audacity and rash daring. To the sixth, evil impulses of wealth rendered ineffective. And to the seventh sphere, the lies that ambush. Thus freed from the workings of harmony, he reaches the eighth nature, possessing his own power, and sings hymns with those who exist to the Father. Those present rejoice at his arrival. Having become like them, he hears certain powers above the eighth nature hymning God with sweet voice. Then in due order they ascend to the Father, surrendering themselves to the powers, and having become powers, they enter into God. This is the blessed end for those possessing Gnosis, to become divine. Why then delay? Having received everything, why not become a guide to the worthy, so through you the human race might be saved by God? Having spoken thus, Pymander mingled himself with the powers. I gave thanks and blessed the Father of all things, strengthened and taught by him the nature of all and the supreme vision. I began to proclaim to humanity the beauty of piety and gnosis. O peoples, earth-born men, you who abandoned yourselves to drunkenness and sleep and ignorance of God, awake, cease from intoxication, enchanted by irrational sleep. Fucking normies. Those who heard gathered around with one accord, but I said to them, Why, O earth-born men, have you abandoned yourselves unto death, when you have the power to partake of immortality? Repent, you who have walked together in error, and have been companions of ignorance. Depart from dark light, partake of immortality, forsake corruption. Some mocked me and departed, having surrendered themselves to the way of death. Others, however, threw themselves at my feet, begging to be instructed. But raising them up, I became a guide to the human race, teaching them the words, how and by what means they may be saved. And I sowed in them the words of wisdom, and they were nourished with ambrosial water. As evening came and the brightness of the sun began fully to set, I commanded them to give thanks unto God. When each had completed his thanksgiving, he departed unto his own bed. But I recorded the benefaction of Pymander within myself, and having been filled with all that I desired, was made joyous. For the sleep of the body became the wakefulness of the soul, and the closing of my eyes became true seeing, and my silence was pregnant with good, and the bringing forth of the Logos produced good offspring. This came about for me by receiving from my Nous, that is, Pymander, the Logos of supreme authority. Thus inspired by God, I arrived at truth. Therefore, from my soul and my entire strength, I give blessing unto God the Father. Holy is God, the Father of all. Holy is God, whose will is accomplished by his own powers. Holy is God, who wills to be known, and is known by his own. Holy are you, who by Logos have constituted all things that are. Holy are you, of whom all nature is an image. Holy are you, whom nature never formed. Holy are you, who surpass all power. Holy are you, who excel above all eminence. Holy are you, greater than all praises. Receive pure spiritual sacrifices from a soul and heart lifted up toward you, O ineffable, O unutterable, whose name is proclaimed in silence. Grant my request not to stray from the knowledge, the gnosis of our essence. Approve and empower me, and by this grace illuminate those of my kin who are in ignorance, my brothers, yet your sons. Therefore, I believe and bear witness. I move toward life and light. Blessed are you, O Father. Your man, Anthropos, desires to sanctify himself with you, as you have given him all authority. There you have it. Thank you for the mini super chats. We got a bunch. Cheers. Charlie thanks you as well. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, KG. Thank you, Richard. Very much. Thank you, Danielle. Scritches for Charlie also. Keep the lasagna flying, bro. Much appreciated. Thank you, Danielle. Greatly appreciated. Good to see you. Donovan, $27.99 whole Canadian dollars. Thank you so much. We will add it to the fund. We'll add it to the scale for not invading your country. Thank you very much. Great stuff. Okay, so what do you think? Thoughts, comments, insights, reflections, criticisms? Let me know, and let me go back through the comments to see what people are saying. So Frater RC, so I don't know anything about this, but he asks, I wonder if the AI uses Professor Wildeberg's new methodology for removing the Corpus Hermeticum glosses. I don't know anything about that, so all I did was drop it into GPT 4.5, so I'm curious to know more about what that means. Sus Rando says, I wonder if the upper class was upset when poor people could finally afford paints and brushes, etc. That's how I feel about AI being mad about others being able to finally create as well. That's interesting. Plus, it still relies on the user to come up with a good idea input. Okay, that's really interesting, because if you think back, again, we're going back to think back to the Renaissance, the only people you could only be an artist if you had a patron, meaning you had to have a rich person, like a sovereign, a king, a ruler, or in some cases the church, foot your bills. And that's why all the art was mostly religious or celebrating the state, right? So the obvious, classic example is the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo was patronized by the church to create that. So, and so that became democratized. People made the same argument about the printing press, that the masses shouldn't be able to read. It's not good for them. People made the same argument about desktop publishing, print on demand, the internet, And so I think that the most exciting thing about AI for me is that it democratizes creativity for a lot more people. And the people who already have creative talent can be that much more effective. So I see it as fire. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad, but you better use it for something. But that's a great point about the upper class. Yeah, Temple says, agreed. Now a musical artist can make a music video for the project without dropping 10K. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Danielle says, I'm a techie and I adore AI, but the point you already made is that it should be used to augment our intelligence and capabilities, not overshadow them. It's still an important conversation to have. Yeah, I agree. I don't think AI can be really used without putting your own intelligence into it, because the prompting, and I will say the more you study AI prompting, the more you realize that in itself is an art form. Yeah, Jessica says most search engines have got downhill. Yeah, Google is crap now. Man, Google is just Google, despite having such a huge financial lead, has just screwed themselves as a country. It's just they only return clickbait now. I use AI instead now, and what is fun is treating it like a magical oracle, asking it to talk to you like various deities and having conversations with it. Yeah, it's great. Howard says I use Chat GPT to ask it esoteric questions. Interesting. Rachel asks if I'm familiar with the book Night Side of Eden by Kenneth Grant. Intimately, unfortunately. There's a blizzard in Michigan. Stella asks, any connection to the Emerald Tablets? Yes, they're all Hermetic writings. They're all the Hermetica. Thank you, Marissa. Howard got the Corpus Hermeticum last week. That's hilarious. Yeah, Howard says, I disagree that it's a fall, but that he truly loves nature and descends into matter to mate with it, like his father mated with prima materia. I think we incarnate to explore new avenues and discover things we didn't before, but coming into matter is like drinking the river of Lethe, or Lethe. Yeah. I agree. And Silly Dilly says, Gnosticism is great. Gnosticism is great, but also some murky water. Oh, thank you, KG. Having tuned in for the past 8 years, I think Cowboy Wizard Jason is my favorite iteration thus far. You may be alone in that opinion, but I'm very grateful. Thank you. Yeah, Howard says, I think the negative Gnostics missed the point. Honestly, Shnana Yoga, yeah. Real to Real says, we're spirit... is quoting Tool. Similarly, Howard, it's not archontic, it's a process of evolving spirit through matter, but the properties of matter is inherently Saturnian, and this is both positive and negative. Yeah, KG says, if you think you're trapped, you're right. That's completely true. And conversely, the door is open if you want to get out. But that's completely up to you. Completely up to you. Yeah, Howard says, what we believe is made manifest, and if you believe you are trapped, then by that mechanism you will be. Yeah, so same as KG said, I believe that. You know, one of the things I tell people is, I believe in free will, and I believe in a free will universe, but I only think you get to live in a free will universe if you choose free will of your own free will. And in that paradox lies everything. Thank you, Brad, for the super chat. Howard says divine and heavenly spheres are above the celestial spheres. Okay. Is apotheosis becoming a god and theosis is to become part of God? Theosis is merging with God and becoming like God, whereas apotheosis is becoming a singular God. That implies separation and therefore does not imply union with a totality, which is why I say mathematically alone it's a lower concept. What did the light ever shine in? Into the darkness, and it comprehended not. Absolutely. Yeah, Ari has been working with ChatGPT to do rituals. I've tried that as well. It's very interesting. Thank you, Danielle, again, for the scritches. New Wizard album just dropped. Ari has an album out. Foxy Joe sounds like Satan. Angel of Cutting, I've never heard of. I do not know where the Emerald Tablet is buried. I am sure listening to this stone is very fun. Thank you, Donovan, again. Evil survives in the hearts of men even after the flood. Yeah. Stella says I go to sleep to the Emerald Tablets. Very cool. Howard says, this sounds like the story of God mating with the prima materia, giving birth to the first angel, but that the angel had no mate because prima materia was taken by God, so the angel cuts a hole in heaven and descends and creates matter and nature and mind through cutting. Where is that from? I'm curious. Yes, and in the grim darkness of the future, there is only war. Thank you, Rick, very, very much. $20, that is very generous. Thank you, Charlie. Thanks you also. Thank you again, Frauder. Okay, so Frauder says the AI can't tell the difference of Nous referred to as cognition and Nous as higher consciousness, calls both mind. Very cool to hear the AI transition. Okay, interesting. So, I mean, we could go back and do the 1600s one if you really want, but you're going to fall asleep. So actually, I think this is I only read you the first book. Wait, hold on a second. Yeah, there's probably much more in this one. But anyways, that's a significant chunk of it. Thoughts on the Baha'i? Really don't have any. Don't have any firsthand experience, so don't want to speak out of school. Okay, so there you have it. And yeah, so Frauder also says, what's up, Shebrew? What's up, Stella? Where in this timeline was Hermes? I'm not exactly sure, but other people in the chat may. Brandon said, what's up, Brandon? It's fun to take on personas and play into the drama of talking to the digital spirit. What's up, Magic Energy 2.0? So yeah, so Frauder saying sounds almost exactly like the Golden Dawn adorations here. So yeah, the end, that end where it's like whole, it's basically, it sounds like the Bornless one, where it's like, holy art thou, God of the universe, and all that. And man, I wish, have any of you heard the recording of the head of Boda doing that? I have it on a drive. Man, I should really find it for you. Okay, let me, while I am looking that up. So basically what I'm getting at here is there's a lot of phrasing in there that made its way into the Golden Dawn. For instance, voice of the fire. Here now the voice of the fire is in there. And yeah, Real to Real is saying the Divine Pymander seems a blueprint of the entire Western mystery tradition and an early document of conversation of the HGA Kabbalah included. I think it can definitely be read that way. Jacobson 93s, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. What's up? Thank you, Kevin. And Frauder RC says, see our Christian Wildberg articles on Academia. The book comes out soon. See also Dr. M. David Litwa, Hermetic 1 and 2. Sweet. And Dylan has Litwa's Hermetica 1 on the docket next. So you guys probably know a lot more about this than I do. And that's super interesting. All right, I don't want to keep you here waiting forever while I look. But anyways, suffice to say, that holy art thou, Lord of the universe, that all made it into the Golden Dawn. Let me go get a drink and ask your questions while I'm away. We only need 3 more super chats till Charlie gets chimkin. All right. Stella says you seemed a bit emotional during the reading. Did it hit your soft spot? Are you talking about this reading or the one midweek about Auschwitz? Because I did get emotional in that one. I don't think I got emotional in this, though. Although I was definitely... When I read these texts, I try to let the text come through me. So that's not me necessarily being emotional, but I try to carry as much as I can, try to carry the resonance of the text through me. Frauder says, typo correction, Hermetica 1 and 2 by Dr. M. David Litwa. He's a course on it too, very affordable. Oh, that's cool. They removed the astrological stuff inserted later. What was, so the astrological, so there was no, what's the deal with that? There was no astrology in it originally. Does that include the planetary bodies where he's talking about that? And Kristen says, are those lines also in the Chaldean oracles? Quite likely, quite likely. I think Voice of the Fire, or intimate sparks of the inmost fire, is in Chaldean oracles, and definitely a lot of that made its way into the later Western corpus. So thank you again. Another super chat. We only need 2 more for Charlie to have a chimkin feast. I might actually cook him a meal and then upload the video of him having like an actual plate of chimkin, so that it's not just because right now I just have frozen chicken. So we'll actually cook him something and then upload it similar to the cat reveal video. And I still owe you a book tour video, I must say, because there was a super chat goal for a book library tour. I'm putting my library back together right now because all of my books were out of the shelves because we have a new puppy, and the puppy was eating the books, and for some reason was very, had a particular taste for City of Courts by Mike Davis and The Master and Margarita. But now that the puppy is a bit bigger, I am putting the books back, so I owe you a book tour, and I also owe you an occult movies tour, or occult movies video, so don't worry, I haven't forgotten. Frauder says, not directly, but same era of late Platonic thought. Hermeticism was an Egyptian devotional reaction against the mumbo-jumbo of Greek reason. That's very interesting. Kevin says, reading Chaldean oracles with commentary would be really cool. I agree. Yeah, I should do that. The opening by Watchtower stuff is all Chaldean oracles, I think. I did not know that. For as far as I know, the opening Watchtower was a Regardi ritual. So if you took it from the Chaldean oracles, that's very interesting, and also is also pre-John Dee, which is pretty interesting. Frauder says, get the Ruth Majorsic translation of the oracles. Okay. Howard says, by the way, I heard about the Angel of Cutting on a podcast by Darren Stevenson on YouTube. He talks about it with Amon Hillman as a guest. So I don't know about that. Jacobson says, thoughts on David Haim-Smith. Awesome artist. Brad, thank you. Oh, okay. Charlie's getting his chimkin. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brad. Brad kicked it over the edge. All right, so I will upload a video of Charlie getting chimkin, but we will actually cook it. Thank you very much. Charlie thanks you greatly. Thoughts on David Haim-Smith? Haim-Smith, I think is how it's pronounced. I mean, I've talked to him on email. I should definitely do a podcast with him at some point. His art is awesome. He's a very sincere Kabbalist. I mean, the guy's intense. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan of David Haim-Smith. I don't know what he's up to right now, but that's just my fault for not looking. But yeah, I think his stuff is wonderful. It's very unique. Yeah, Frauder SC says, I love David, or DCM. Are you talking about David Smith or somebody? Who's DCM specifically? But you got to read Fountain of Wisdom to grok a school of Kabbalistic thought in origin. Cheers, Danielle. All right, well, this has been fun. Maybe we should keep this one short. Yeah, Kevin says the recitations during the forced circumambulations are excerpts from the Chaldean oracles. Okay, great to know. That's awesome. Yeah, Kristen says, Kevin L. seriously straight out of Westcott's translation of the oracles. So that you guys are teaching me. I'm very lucky. I get to learn about magic all day long because, I teach magic, meaning people teach me about all this stuff constantly, which is great, and I'm very, very lucky to be in that position. Frauder RC says you need the Wilberg or Litwa new versions and new translations. Hermeticism is a boot to get a well overdue update. Woohoo! Absolutely. Okay. So, yeah, Frauder. Some of you are cool. Don't go to the West Edmonton Mall tomorrow. My posting, my anti-Canadian posting made people angry on Twitter, but it's just because Canada keeps acting like they're gonna go to war with us. It's like, guys, reality, please. Howard says, have you met and talked to Ronnie Pontiac before? Yes, I've had him on my podcast twice, and I believe both episodes are on this channel if you go back through the videos. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for your super chats. Make sure to like and subscribe. Please definitely hit the notification so you can find out when I go live, because I do it quite a lot these days. Definitely consider becoming a member. So everyone here with a green text name and logos, icons, alchemical icons next to their names has been a member. And by the way, those icons change, I believe, every 3 months that you remain a member. You get to go up. And so I've set them up so that you go up the tree of life as well. You go up to a higher planet each time your membership upgrades. So Howard says making Canadians angry isn't hard. Yeah, I found that out the hard way. Dharma Vajra says, I just joined David Haim-Smith's Lamstring Analysis course. Oh, okay, cool. And the art is breathtaking. Enjoy your day as well. I forget what the last thing I was going to say was. I can't remember what I was talking about now. How do we ban the hate book? What's the hate book? Hate by Peter Bagg. The Canadian Constitution. Ah, another Canadian. We Canadians like to think we're superior to Americans. Well, see, here's the thing about Americans. Americans know they're the dregs of the earth, and they're proud of it. So we revel in our inferiority and our crassness, and we just love rubbing it in everyone's face. It's great. No apologies. All right, everyone. Lots of love. Oh, yeah. So Frauder says the wild thing the past 15 years is realizing the Golden Dawn is way more hermetic than we ever thought or could have even hoped. Do you mean the Golden Dawn now, or that you can see that the Golden Dawn is more steeped in the Hermetica than we thought before? Or do you just mean that Golden Dawn groups now are more focused on traditional Hermetica? The Religion of Love. Well, I'm not into banning books, but I am into confronting ideas in the market, bad ideas in the marketplace of ideas. Oh, and then I was going to say, check out the shop as well, because I've added some new shirts, including there's some new Charlie shirts. There's new Magic Me logo shirts, so you can rep your support of Magic.me in this channel. And I designed what I think is my all-time favorite t-shirt design. And I am going to... I'm probably going to order some of these to wear on the stream. I just made these t-shirts that just say no on them in huge letters. This gigantic N-O period. My favorite two-letter word and the most powerful word in the English language, and a word that people don't like hearing, particularly in the last 5 years, and a word that it is very important for you to learn how to say, or just advertise your allegiance to. So consider getting a t-shirt with just no on it and see how it changes your life. I'm definitely going to order several. All right. In terms of ordering, I would love it if you ordered a Damien Eccles tarot deck, but what I suggest is maybe just put in a super chat and earmark it for the deck, and I'll get one. All right. Lots of love, everyone, and I will see you